Buenos dias. Good morning. So last night I talked about this book, the Latinx Files, and that was my project for a long period of time. And so today I'm talking about kind of the thing that I'm thinking about next and right now a little bit. So it's a little bit experimental. So we'll see how it goes. Basically. I'm not even sure where this idea came from, but a lot of the work I've been doing is about the future, science fiction set in the future. And so I decided that I think it would be interesting to look at the present, because in some ways, just in terms of the thinking about science fiction, usually the present is what is being kind of mirrored in the future in science fiction. And it's, in a way, kind of like the less important part. And then the same goes for fantasy, which is often, using parts of the past or medievalism or folklore. And the present is sort of the little bits and pieces that make up the fantasy. So I thought, what would happen if we just kind of like switch our temporal lens a little bit and think about the present, and see what comes of that. So this is what I'm kind of thinking about, the beginning thoughts about, what are the characteristics of the speculative present? So the fantastic of the moment, that's just rephrasing it. But there's a shift to experience, I think. So in terms of readers or viewers or participants in some way, although that's not necessary, but I do think that there's a bit of a shift to how a work is being experienced. The other part would be the kind of basic part, which is that there's a blurring of fantasy and reality. So throughout all of the speculative genres, there's some sort of blurring that's going on, some kind of mixing of the familiar and unfamiliar, something that is real and something that is not real on a very basic level. That goes through all the speculative genres. And so in the speculative present, there's also that blurring, that combination of the real and the not real, but it's a kind of blurriness that happens. And then finally, immersion, I think, is a pretty key characteristic of the speculative present, and maybe even to the point that it's better to call this little weird category something, like speculative immersion or something like that, because I think it's the quality that really defines the speculative present. Meaning, we are involved in it, right here, right now. Something is happening in the moment, and that you are involved in it. And that could be complete immersion, or it could be a little bit of immersion. So here's some examples that I've come up with. And the first one is virtual reality, where you are in a location, in a geographic location, but it feels like, or it seems like, you are somewhere else. And virtual reality has been in development since the 60s, really. But only now it's kind of accessible enough that people can get to it, and not pay thousands of dollars. And so this is a project I've been doing with my students, where we have a class during the week in person, and then a class during the week in virtual reality. And in the virtual reality class, we meet around a campfire, a virtual campfire. Everybody is an avatar, kind of cartoon-like character. And there's all kinds of virtual reality stories and narratives and fiction, and so it's a whole world that's created there, and so it really is this blurring, blurring of fantasy and reality, and you are, on one level completely immersed, but of course your body on another level knows it's not in the world of the campfire, but sitting in a chair, staring at a wall, actually. So that's one example. Another example is LARPing, live-action role-playing, which I think there are some events around LARPing here at the conference. That one is definitely more in the realm of kind of like deep immersion, where you're taking a role, you go somewhere to the forest, and you're playing a game, or you're going through a story, and that one is a more deep immersion, like role-playing in terms of like Dungeons and Dragons with a board and dice. That's a little less immersion, but you're still taking a kind of, a role, acting out a character to a degree. Ritual and drug experiences. I think this one's actually really important because I think it's often not connected to the speculative. These are clearly, they have their own institutions, religion or the drug scene or the drug industry, as in the case of where I live in New Mexico. But they definitely have these qualities, right? There's a kind of fantastic of the moment. It's very much about an experience that you have. Can be very much a blurring of the lines between fantasy and reality to the point that you don't know which is which. And then immersion, once you are whatever, high or tripping, you are in it. Like you can't just kind of magically come out of it. Gaming, I mentioned, of course, but then there's also video games, which has its own theory. Game theory is a whole thing. So that's interesting for me to kind of touch this other realm. Hallucinations, that's connected a bit to the drug part. But I also wanted to kind of just mention it apart from drugs. Like if you have Parkinson's disease, I don't know what that is in Espanol, but if you have some kind of disease where you're hallucinating, seeing things, playing out crazy scenarios in your head. Now there you might have an element of horror, where something is terrifying, and I think that can be part of the disease as well. But it's interesting to frame that as a speculative moment as well, as opposed to an illness. Finally, the performance art. This is the one that I think, I don't know, I feel like most of you probably have some idea in your head about performance art. It's a kind of theater that is not just on a stage, but maybe on the street, or it may be in the halls of the school. Performance art can be anywhere, and it can involve the people on the street, whether they want to be there or not. They can be involved in the performance. So there's a level of kind of involuntarily, participating in the speculative present, and I think. So there's this work, Astral Compass, which it's at a museum in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I live, and I just really, I think it's aesthetically fascinating. It's kind of has a retro look, but you're walking through a museum, you walk around the corner, and there's this object. And it's an astral compass, so it's a compass to the stars or the galaxy. Is there a story behind it? I have no idea. At least there's not one listed in the museum. So it's not like you enter a narrative exactly, but there you are confronted with this strange object, and it's in the moment, and you have to, either it sort of came from, outer space to where we are or where you are in this museum, or something like that. But nevertheless, there it is. You're not really choosing to see it exactly. You're immersed to a very. This is not like a LARP. It's just an object, but you are somehow experiencing it in the moment. Yeah. So that's a very small little example to kind of start talking about it. Ana Mendieta is a Cuban performance artist. Probably some of you know about her. She has these kind of speculative images where she becomes part of a tree. They're very much connected to her feminist critique, and likewise, you kind of confront this moment. You're walking through the forest, and here is Ana Mendieta as a tree or a bush or something, and it's a kind of strange, speculative moment. Okay. The one I want to talk a little bit more is the Spirit Republic de Puerto Rico. So this is a performance art piece by the artist Adal Maldonado, who's a Puerto Rican artist. And so he realized, so Puerto Ricans don't have a separate Puerto Rican passport. Puerto Ricans use a U.S. passport. So they're part of the U.S., but it's a very complicated political situation. So what he did was create a passport. So I'm going to actually bring. Can I give this to you to pass around? Yeah. And the idea is that it kind of takes switches the situation of sovereignty. So if you have a passport, then you are an independent nation. But at the same time, this is not a kind of like hardcore political act as well. You can see there's a domino on the cover. Inside there are pictures of roosters, which you'll see. So it's also El Spirit Republic. So it's very clearly not an official government document. On one hand, but so there's two levels that this is a kind of speculative present object. One is that the passport has actually been used to enter a variety of countries, so mostly like South American countries and Caribbean, Curacao, Colombia, Cuba. So and then you have to wonder, did the immigration agent just like not care? Like were they just like stamping things and like whatever? Or did they not know that there is not a Puerto Rican passport? It doesn't matter on some level, but because at that point the art object has kind of come out of the museum and is acting in the moment, in the present moment, as a government document. And so, and again, the immigration official is doing it to a degree without will. They're presented with the art object. They have to make a decision. And I was actually a little bit afraid flying over here with it in my backpack that they thought it was like a fake passport or something like that. But that would have been fun. So that's the kind of speculative present with the passport. It's kind of taken out of the museum, and there's a particular situation that it's involved in. The other one is the photos. So I don't know if how well you can see the photos, but so these are photos that the artist would take at a kind of artistic gathering of Nuyorican. So Puerto Ricans who are living in New York, and Adal would sit in the corner, and he would have like a desk and a typewriter and the passports, and he would take your picture, put it into the passport, sign it, all of that, and basically act like a government official. And so, but this became a photography series, the Out of Focus Nuyorican. And so it was, again, this moment where these community members, artists, musicians in the community were becoming part of this government, like fictional government act. And in the moment, in the present, signing the form, taking the picture, just like you were if you were to go to the post office and get your passport photo taken. There's a lot of symbolism to do with the out-of-focus Nuyorican. So part of the idea is it's connected to the idea of being out of the focus of the mainstream. While he was taking these photos, he was also reading the novel Invisible Man. I don't know if you have read Invisible Man. You should read it, by Ralph Ellison. It's one of the greatest novels ever. This is not the Invisible Man, but Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Anyway, there's a connection between being visible and race. And it's actually complicated in the novel. It's not just about being like unseen by white people, with the black protagonist. It's not just about that. It's about also him not seeing himself as well. So there's a lot of layers to it. And with the out of focus Nuyorican has that element as well. So it's about being out of focus in the mainstream, especially Puerto Rican politics, which most people in the U.S. have no clue about at all. But it also it brings up the idea of being mixed. So being blurry also is kind of like a representation of being hybrid or like mixed up. So which is very much Puerto Rican, being part, from the U.S., part from the Caribbean, part Latin American, all these different cultures coming in and being mixed up and forming something unique. The other kind of way that the Puerto Rican passport gets involved in the speculative present is the internet. It's kind of strange, but because it is an object in the world, it gets pushed into weird algorithms, and there's a Puerto Rican embassy, there's an embassy website which will show the embassies of the world, and then it ends up on that web page, the Puerto Rican embassy, which doesn't exist at all, and then it gets on pages where you can buy them. This one is very I think it's $3,000 or something. That may be the next one. Yeah, 3,000. And so it enters also this realm of the internet, where it's this fictional object, this fake object, is entering the real world of the internet. So this is another kind of example of the speculative present. This world is very much a kind of based in a utopian thinking, but also working against that as well. So this is the map of the Spirit Republic. So it's very much a kind of fantastic map. It's shaped like a domino, but at the same time there's it's topographical with the mountains, and so again the blurring of the fictional and the fantastic. So a lot of his images have this kind of hybrid element. Arroz and beans Spanglish sandwich is the official language. Spanglish is the official language of the Spirit Republic. Here are some of the images of the out of focus Nuyorican. There's a villain in this world, in the Spirit Republic de Puerto Rico, Dr. Ocula. And Dr. Ocula has eyeglasses that make things clear. And why is that a villain? Why not just be blurry, or why not just be clear? Well, because it takes away the reality. It's of the island, which is this mixing that I mentioned, and it sort of wants to assimilate. You know, the glasses would assimilate rather than be a kind of like movement to be self-accepting, you know, of who you are and all the cultures that make you up. So Dr. Ocula he's kind of the villain. He's not exactly the villain, but at least he's going down um, the wrong track. And this is an image from the Bodega Bombers. They also, like Dr. Ocula, they want to clarify the situation. They want to take away the blurriness, and they want Puerto Rico to become part of the United States. And so they're blowing up the Cafe Bustelo, which is kind of a symbol of being Puerto Rican in the U.S., and it's the connection to that culture of Puerto Rico. I'm about out of time, but I very quickly wanted to mention there is a kind of depiction of the speculative present. Very quickly, there's a show called Los Spookies. I don't know if you've seen it, but you should see it. It's really good. This is basically a group of friends who get together and create these strange speculative moments for people, and then it becomes a job. So in this case, this is a group of people that they're making like a quinceañera party, but they're making it, you know, filled with horror. So the waiter is losing his arm. So again, this is a moment where the audience at this quinceañera, they're involved in this thing. It's there in the moment. They're immersed in it. So the priest for sure doesn't want to be involved in it, but he is nevertheless. And so they go through all these different scenarios with aliens, and ultimately at the end, it shows that the speculative present doesn't have to be just entertainment, but it can also be used for healing, actually. And there's a woman who can't sleep, and so they create a scenario where she is seeing the street from her childhood, and then so there's a blurring of fantasy and reality. She begins to think, is this real or a dream? And eventually is able to sleep for the first time in weeks. So the speculative present can be used for healing, and then the second season is very much political as well, and that's another story.
Agua.
Okay, gracias.